Hey guys, Kirk here with a pretty big update for you this time. So I have now a working 8-motor prototype of my haptic feedback device that I'm building for simulators, mainly driving, but also flight potentially, which is up next after I get this car thing figured out. So a lot of people ask me, well, what does it do? I think some of you have probably heard of Valve's new controller where they're talking about high definition haptics. That's kind of what I'm doing. Slightly different approach though. The Valve controller, I think right now, the Steam controller has one or two, I believe 2 motors. Similar kind of technology, linear sort of haptic, sort of like a piston rather than something that rotates around. And basically I have similar technology here. I'm just sort of applying it to a very specific application here, which is being able to feel the sort of bumps and feel the load on each of your 4 tires. So what I've done, basically I got it working with Assetto Corsa. I had it working with iRacing, and there's some limitations in terms of what you can pull and how fast out of the actual simulator. So Assetto Corsa is pretty nice because it does a shared memory reference where you can pull out an array of the actual load on each tire. So I'm able to take that data and push it straight into these 4 motors, so you can really feel every little bump in the road. And another thing, the Nordschleife laser scan edition just came out for Assetto Corsa. I've been driving this track since 1998 when Grand Prix Legends launched with it, so I'm pretty familiar with it. So it's pretty exciting to be able to jump into a car and feel all the little bumps. What else? What's it like? It's pretty intense being able to feel the individual bumps on each side of the car. You can feel the weight shift from left to right. You can feel the weight shift from front to back when you're accelerating. One kind of moment where I started just kind of laughing was I was on the back side of the Nordschleife, and I kind of went wide on a turn and my tire hit these rumble strips, and I could feel the individual bumps, which was just mind-blowing. It's also very low latency, so it's not like you're feeling effects after you. I mean, it might even be, I haven't proved it yet, but faster than what your eyes are picking up. So it'd be kind of interesting discussion about whether or not this would give you an advantage over somebody who's stuck with a mere visual input, monitor, etc. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But what else? 2 amps, 5 volts, USB currently at least is not sufficient, so I had to get a wall wart over there, and that runs into the back of this thing. Try to get some kind of enclosure for it, so I'm not just having wires and PCBs all over the place. Also let's see here, I'm using some Cat 6 cables to sort of route those outside of the box, and so right now, like I said, 4, but I'm going to do 8 soon, so I'll be able to feel not just the load on each tire, but the lateral longitudinal G-forces. With all that at very low latency, you should be in a VR headset, which I'm going to demo here shortly. You should be able to be pretty close to immersed. Okay, so here's how it works. I have Visual Studio running. I can make tweaks to the software in real time. We've got this on a 144 Hertz monitor, so I'm trying to see how low the latency really is. So I'll just go ahead and, pardon the shaky camera work, launch the software. So it'll connect and see that it found, basically in this USB cable right here, there's a chip that It allows me to talk to this thing via USB. So it's connecting to that first. And then what I do is a whole bunch of motor setup. So for each of these 8 motors, I've gone through and configured them, 2 volts, rated voltage, all kinds of stuff. Motor setup complete. All right, now, I don't know if you can hear that. I set it up so that the first thing it does is it just fires them all off at 100%. These things are maxed out right now. And this is kind of a debug feature. And to avoid electrocuting myself, so they're all buzzing right now. And then what I'll do, pardon me, I need a camera person, hit the button and it'll start decreasing in force until it hits 0. So I'm measuring the latency between writes to each of the motors. Finish loop, and now, boom, I just dropped it into the Assetto Corsa mode. So I'm pulling out, these are the live values coming from the load from the front right and front left motors, and I'm going to attempt to drive off with my big toe here. And you can see the, if I do a little weaving, the load will change on this 2 tires, so you can actually feel that very low latency through the motors. Anyway, for the next part I'm going to jump into my sim rig and do some actual driving with the VR headset on and talk through some of the scenarios where this is kind of interesting. So I'll be right back. Okay, back now down in the man cave where I actually test this thing. I have an Oculus Rift DK2 headset hanging on the wall there, Logitech G25 force feedback wheel, which I've had for 10 years plus and it's still going strong. Obudo racing seat here. Also the 2-year-old girl cave occasionally, and Porsche 917. I hope somebody builds that for Assetto Corsa or something someday. That's the car I dream of at night. Anyway, so I'm going to jump in here, put the VR headset on, and talk through a few more details about this thing, and then that will wrap it up. Okay, so we are at Nordschleife, Germany, Nürburgring, and I am in the KTM crossbow device on my hand, not my virtual hand but my real hand, and I'm going to drive around and talk a little bit more about motion sickness, about laser scans, haptics as it relates to presence, and a couple other things. So one thing about motion sickness that really gets me, if you're in VR and you jam it in reverse like that, I don't get motion sick, but that is enough to make you a little woozy. Anyway, that's something I'm hoping haptics can help with, and specifically what I mean is, so I have this device that tells me G-forces as well as sort of force on the wheels. The G-forces, what I'm thinking of doing is getting some sort of gyroscopes and sensors and feeding them into this mysterious wooden box I have here, and driving to work with this thing on. The point would be train your brain to sort of associate the G-forces that you're feeling in real life with the sensations that are coming through the haptic motors. And point being, when you get out of your real car and get into a simulator,
you would start to associate that feeling with G-forces, and therefore when you threw it in reverse, it wouldn't be as horrendous a feeling as you get without any sort of cues as far as, you know, what motion really feels like. What else? The second thing I want to talk about, whoa, I'm trying to read my notes under my VR glasses here, if you can tell why I was staring at the sky so much. The laser scan. So I have both versions of this track, the Snoopy version, this is the official version, and you can just say right there, you can feel it getting light. The motors cut out when you hit sort of these little gaps. You get a little light in the car. You feel it. You also feel it when you're shifting. You feel the weight on the front tires between shifts as the car is kind of stops accelerating. But the difference between the laser scan version of this track and the older version, the Snoopy version, pretty severe. You can kind of feel it with the force feedback steering wheel. You can tell that there's a pretty good difference. You can tell by looking at the just looking at the suspension move around. See if I can get in and look at it. So it's jiggling around pretty good, just cruising like this, but with a force feedback steering wheel, you really don't feel all these little bumps. Because, you know, your wheel technically isn't moving left or right necessarily if it's a speed bump. So anyway, lots of interesting stuff I'm kind of learning. One of the interesting things is cars with downforce, you can sort of pipe in this data and you kind of learn things about a car that you maybe wouldn't really know in real life. Let me give you an example. Downforce is something, when you're driving in a straight line at 100 miles an hour, you really don't know how much downforce you have. If you're on a perfectly smooth track. So I guess my point here is that this sort of haptics and augmented reality type stuff could feed you more data than you would get in an actual car. In other words, the ability to pull the wheel load from these 4 individual wheels in real time is something you can't necessarily do in a real car. It's kind of interesting to think about the implications from like driver training. You have potentially more information at your fingertips, literally fingertips, in a simulator than you would in a real car. So if you're doing suspension design or you're playing around with different setups before a race, you can feed in camber, you can feed in wheel slip, you can feed in all kinds of data into these sort of haptic actuators and feel what's happening, which you really wouldn't be privy to in a real car. You can kind of infer from what's happening with yaw and pitch and roll and geez, what's happening at the tires, but you really don't have, you know, a direct line into that data. So anyway, it's interesting to think of the applications here. I think probably in professional sports there might be applications if you could, you know, the eyeball, the optic sort of pathway to your brain, I've heard 200 to 300 milliseconds before it kind of registers and you can react, depending on the person. and the type of motion. Haptics potentially is lower than that. So more research needed here, and I'm going to run some tests to see if I can figure out. Essentially, I want to do a race with the eyeball versus the fingertip, and to see which one can register motion faster. Now, if it turns out that these haptic motors are conveying information faster than you can get even in, say, a VR simulator with low latency optics like this, then yeah, there's going to be implications. Interesting thing happened here. If you look closely, and maybe I'll zoom and enhance here. You see these little rumble strips over here. So I came out of this turn up that hill, and I'm wearing this haptic feedback thing, and I hit these rumble strips, and you could feel every one, even though I'm doing, I don't know, 80, 90 miles an hour coming out of there. You could feel every single one of these through the feedback device. If you speed up, you get less of that from force feedback wheel. So interesting stuff. I'll probably ramble on about this a bit more if you're interested in future episodes. So subscribe if you like this bizarre niche we live in, and on that note, I'll leave it till next time. Let me know if you have any questions about this thing. Pricing. Samsung just started selling these motors in America, North America, for about $2 each, where they were 10. So the cost of building this thing is getting cheaper seemingly by the day, as these haptic motors become a bit more mainstream. So interesting times we live in. Looking forward to talking a little bit about the Valve HTC Vive that's coming out. It has similar motors in it, LRA, some version of LRA, linear resonant actuators, much like, well, exactly like I'm using anyway. Initially, if you watch the video on their talks, they buried these motors so deep inside the controller that they couldn't feel them, so they had to use a stronger sort of version of this. But interesting nonetheless. What else? There was something else I was going to talk about. Let's see my notes. Oh yeah, presence. So augmented reality, virtual reality. The point is, at some point your brain is convinced you are actually where you appear to be. I think HD haptics, as Valve calls it, is really going to become a bigger piece of achieving that. Beyond just kind of being able to control your environment. The VR, I think, is gonna, especially from a motion sickness perspective, is gonna benefit from haptics and sort of unwiring your assumptions about what things feel like and retraining your brain.